Welcome back to the commercialisation of sports series with me, Anthony Morrissey, the CEO and founder of AMSC. And I've got a fantastic guest ahead for you. Someone who is, I would consider, a mentor of mine, going back to my time working at Munster Rugby, but also someone who's got knowledge right across the commerciality of sport and is now in a pretty decent position to explain where he thinks the past of commercialisation of sport is, where the current is, and where the future potentially would go. So it's with great honour that I'm delighted to welcome Mr. Enda Lynch, the CEO of Badminton Ireland. Enda, how are you doing?
Anthony, that is some intro. I'm just going to take a moment to blush here in the corner, but thank you. It's great to be here and delighted to be a part of your new venture.
Yeah, it's look, it's going to be fun. It's the truth, so I don't try not to lie as best I can. I definitely would.
You never have.
Feel that way. I'm going to go right back to the start with yourself when it comes to sport and where you saw your passion come from. So you yourself, where was the first memory you have in sport, and what was it that kind of enhanced you into the life of sport?
It's a great question. I grew up in a sports fanatic house. Even back in the days of Bog 1, Bog 2 TV or One Channel, whatever. I was born in 78. TV, if there was a sport event, it was always on. The very first clear, now this is ironic for a Kerry man, but I have no recollection of 78. Obviously, I was only born in 78. 79 through 82 when we won 4 All-Irelands and lost the one to Offaly. I've no recollection of them. I was too young, and it didn't mean anything to me. On my 5th birthday, and the week of my 5th birthday in 1984, we grew up on a farm, and we had one of the very, very few holidays away in our lives, and it was up to Galway, Costadale, Galway. And on the Saturday night, I remember my dad getting me out of bed to watch John Tracy come into the stadium to win the silver medal in the LA Olympics. And I had a vague inkling the Olympics were on. They'd been talking about it, and I remember the flying jets going off during the opening ceremony with John Tracy coming in and Jimmy McGee's commentary. That was it. I was hooked. The following day, we went to Dublin to see Kerry play Galway in the All-Ireland semi-final. I can tell you exactly where I was sitting, and I was only 5. Cusack Park upper, or Cusack stand upper rather, in Croke Park. And I spent all the time, for some reason, my sister brought me binoculars, and I spent my time looking across at this little box where Micheál O'Hare was doing the commentary. Now, Micheál didn't last much longer. He had a stroke soon after, and I think it was in 85 or early 85 or thereabouts. So one of his last commentaries was the 84 semi. Kerry won, miserable day, not a good match. But I was fascinated by who's that man calling it out, because I'd heard him on the radio and the whole lot when I was growing up. So even at 5, I was the one looking around going, so how does all this work? So from a very young age, I was more about the mechanics of sport, the mechanics of sports events, and how it all worked, as much as the passion that my family had for sport.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because you use the word passion, and everyone on this series I've spoken to already has also very interestingly spoken about their families or their parents and the connection they have within that and where it comes from within sport. And what I find fascinating again is you, for the 3rd or 4th podcast and I'm doing this, you've spoken about a scenario, your first memory, and you never really mentioned the game once. You haven't said, oh, it was the day that such and such scored a great point or such and such scored a great goal. You actually were speaking about your sister giving you binoculars and your father going to the game and getting you up in the morning to watch John Tracy running. From the perspective of clubs and federations that I'm speaking to, that's what I'm trying to get across to them about the importance of passion within sport. But from your perspective, you said you were born into a sporting family. Was it a sporting active family, or was it a sporting kind of viewing family? And the reason I asked that question is my family, I would have been the one that was the player of the sport, while the rest of my family were obsessed with listening to it on the radio or watching it that way. Which would you have fallen into?
So I'm going to be careful here, because I know my brothers will watch this at some point. So I grew up in a family of 6, mum, dad, 2 brothers and a sister, and I was the youngest. Dad was, when I was growing up, Dad was vice chair of Austin Stacks GA Club. So again, the administrative side of sport was ingrained in us from a very young age. My brothers both played football at a decent club level. My sister did a bit of athletics and the whole lot early on in sport, but didn't play a team sport, for example. I came along and I'm not telling a lie here, I could write a book about the great dugouts of Kerry football because I was that bad at Gaelic football that all I did was sit in the dugout. And the best one, by the way, is in Castlemaine, in Kerry. I I was terrible at football. And eventually one day, again, it comes back to family. I was sitting at home watching the Five Nations, or it was AIL when AIL used to be on, the big TV sport every week. And my brother used to see me every so often watching sport when he was home from college and he watching the rugby. And he's like, "You enjoy the rugby?" I am. "Oh, you have a good physique for it." And he said to my parents, "I think Enda should play rugby." And that's how I ended up playing rugby. And that's where my lifelong association with rugby started. It was again, it came from family. It didn't come from watching, like geez, in the early 80s now, after 82 or 85 thereabouts, like from 85 onwards, Ireland weren't winning a huge amount, so there wasn't much to be celebrating. There wasn't many great moments, great players, but not great moments. So it was, it wasn't about winning and, I remember this goal or that goal. I remember 86 when Kerry won the All Ireland. It was a big deal because mum and dad went and we all stayed at home to the All Ireland, and it was and that was a big match. And I remember that because it was mum and dad were away for the weekend and we were at home. But it was Kerry were going for the three in a row, and Pascal had a hospital bandage around his knee. So I remember all those things. I don't remember, the great moment. I suppose if you go on a bit, where I do begin to separate out sport from great moments is as I got older, and I'll come back to this in a second. Tour de France, Stephen Roach, 87. I remember the breakaway he did. I think it was a time trial that day, up the mountain time trial, or it might have been a breakaway in a group. And I remember that day. I remember, oh, wow. I remember from 88 onwards when Ireland were qualifying, Ray Houghton, Ronnie Whelan. I remember those moments. They were standout. Then you begin to remember the moment and rather than the occasion and the family. But again, 1990, Timofte's miss, David O'Leary's penalty. I was kneeling on the floor in the kitchen so that we could all gather around, including a friend of ours who was up. We were all watching that penalty shootout, and it was a family moment. I didn't see the quarter final because my dad found it too exciting and too tense and he didn't want to watch it. So we went out in the farm and did some fencing, and we came back in and all I heard was effing Scalacci. So again, it comes back to family. And this is where I'm going. Sport is, remember the moments and whatnot, but more often than not, sport is a spiritual thing. It's a community thing. Sport for many people has replaced religion and organized religion as their spiritual and passionate output. And that religion once again was about family, community, etc. Sport is family, community, etc. It's what forms you. It's what creates the memories. And it's only in very recent times that brands are beginning to cotton on to community and the value of community and the value of family and heritage as a way to, own sport or commercialize sport as a brand. Perfect example, Anthony, was only released last night, so we were recording this on the 23rd of August. The Vodafone Ireland ad for the World Cup was released, and it shows a young Andy Farrell in the car going to his first game with his dad and his two brothers behind him. And obviously Andy must have given this insight, but it goes back to community, passion, togetherness, and that's how you can commercialize and deliver powerful stories. And that's what sport has become. It's become about stories, and stories are about people. Stories aren't about the great moment. It's about the people behind the great moment and how they prepared for that great moment. And that's where sport is going. And that's where, the documentaries that are being created and Munster with Access Munster, it's behind the bit. We're so used to watching sport and having great moments and replays and all that. But we want to know, who are the people behind it. That's what value in sport is about. It's about the community and the people and how you stitch all that together. Sorry, I've gone on a bit of a rant there.
Yeah, not at all. You've actually answered exactly my thought process. I would wholeheartedly agree. And I think what's important in that as well is the uniqueness to it.
Yeah.
So every single club, every single sport, has a uniqueness that people need to look at. So you might find yourself looking at that Vodafone Ireland ad and go, oh, that's really cool. I can use that in my sport. But what you've got to realize is you've got to uniqueify that. So you've got to make it work for Badminton Ireland or Munster Rugby or whatever sporting association.
100%.
And the same thing goes for a brand.
100%. And we recently was at the Badminton World Federation AGM, and so all the federations from around the world, 160 of us, whatever it was. And at one workshop, the prevailing sentiment was, if we want to grow the sport, we have to tell better stories about our people on the court. At the moment, the world number one is seen as this phenomenal guy, Victor Axelsen, almost like a robot in how good he is. But very few people know about who he is. They don't know a huge amount about the guy outside of the game or behind the game. His most famous moment and his most famous tweeted moment was when he got COVID while he was in Kiev attending a major tournament during COVID. And he rented an oxygen chamber that he put himself into. He then rented a private jet that the oxygen chamber went into so that he could be flown home into quarantine without breaking quarantine regulation. Now that's the level he went to, and that's his most noted moment as an athlete, other than all the medals he's won. But what was it about? It was about a guy, the means and whatnot, but it was a story. It was a unique moment for a player, the length he'll go to achieve. You look at Mahomes and the love of his family and everything he's gone around in the Netflix piece. You look at the golf piece on Netflix, and the loveliest pieces was Justin Thomas going into a shop on the Saturday evening before he blew the lights out and won the US Open to get his golf grip sorted. You don't see that, but it's a lovely moment of a guy just driving down with his dad, having had a great week, and getting the club gripped in a local DIY golf shop. And there was, they're the moments that sell. They're the moments that bring people closer. They're the moments that make it attractive to an audience. And we'll come on to this again later on, Anthony, about the future of sport. There's one sport that people say isn't even a sport that has got this much better than everyone else. And we'll come on to that in a few minutes.
The interesting part for me, talking about you before I finish off where it goes to, but you personally, because when I grew up, you mentioned Ray Houghton, and Ray Houghton was everything I wanted to be on a football field. He was a small guy, he ran around like a mad thing, and reminded me of everything I wanted to be personally as a footballer. When you were growing up, was there one player that stood out, or was there one kind of team, or was there one kind of element to it that you personally, Enda Lynch, would go out afterwards and run around the field or run around the park going, that's who I want to be?
Look, Mikey Shee was from my club at home, and he's one of the greatest footballers of all time. So you always wanted to emulate him, but sure, I was shocked. I was shocked at the football, so I wasn't going anywhere. To go back to the passion for sport in my family, I've kids now, and people say, look, they're watching too much TV. When I was growing up, you did your jobs in the morning during the summertime, and at lunchtime, the Eurovision music pepped up, and then came on the cycling, the Tour de France coverage with Phil Liggett and whoever else was in Pat McQuaid was in the box with him. And you'd be watching. And that was your afternoon, or the World Athletics or the European Athletics was on. We were absorbed in it. That's what we watched. So I didn't mind. I don't mind my kids sitting and watching sport during the summer. It's what we all did. But I remember Miguel Indurain. Now, I grew up as I said, out in the country, so there was a little laneway out from our house to our neighbour's house before you got to the main road. And we used to do the Tour de Berlin, Lynch Barry. And we used to have 70 laps over and back a 300-metre road. But I was Indurain. I was the man with the low frame and getting my hands down, and I was obsessed with Indurain. I was obsessed with Michael Johnson. Now, as to whether they were clean or not, I separate all that from my admiration for what they did and the style they did it in. the uniqueness to the character that they brought to their own sport, and I loved that. Greg LeMond was another one. A guy who came back from near death to win. So outside of my own sport, they were the ones. As I got older, Gallav will laugh at this, but Gallav in second row, when I started playing rugby, Gallav was the farmer's son from the farming community who got to play for Ireland, and there was just a bit of devilment and a bit of hard nut about him. And I loved watching Gallav play, and I styled how I tried to be on the pitch, even though I was terrible with around Gallav.
Yeah, it's Mick Galway is one of those characters that you can only but talk about. I'm sure I'll tell people when I meet the stories I have of bringing him to New York twice. Very much entertaining. The next thing moving on is to your career. So obviously you realise you're not going to be Michael Inderan, you're not going to be Mick Galway. You may not get onto the sports field or into a bicycle and cycle around the Tour de France. Was sport always your first choice when you started thinking about your professional career, or did you fall into it and go, oh yes, this is where I want to go?
Very good question. Very briefly, I wanted to get into media. So all my family did commerce in UCD, and I did communications in DCU because I wanted to get into radio or TV or film production. Now, I discovered after about 3 minutes on my first day that I wasn't Dawson from Dawson's Creek. I didn't have the 8mm camera. I wasn't going to do radio or film and TV. So, and I still to this day have a passion. When I was in school, I did a 2-week work experience in Radio Kerry, for example, before I ever went to college. And I loved the radio medium. As I was going through all that, though, there was a notice put up on the notice board in college looking for volunteers to work at the Rugby World Cup in 1999 in the media centre. And it was a company called Rushman's Media. We're running it in Lansdowne Road, and they were looking for volunteers from the media schools. I took down the poster and I applied, and I made sure I was going to get that job. I didn't care who else. One other guy had spotted it before me. I brought a load of my friends who I was living with along because they're like, we've very low applications from DCU. Sorry about that. I took the poster down. But I dedicated, like, they needed us a match day. I did a full month with them almost. I nearly quit college for the month, and I spoke to my head lecturer and I said, look, I want to go, try and get a couple of lectures here and there for the month. When they went down to Limerick to Galway or to do Australia, USA in Thomond Park, I was the only volunteer that was brought with them. I spent a month working in a media centre. From there, I saw these guys bringing in and out the Irish team and being their minders at media time, and I went, I want to be like them. They were Slattery PR. My first job ended up being with Slattery PR. I saw this is where I want to go. And then I went straight into Slattery PR, who's a sports sponsorship division. And I've been in sports and sports sponsorship ever since.
Yeah, it's a fascinating story. You go in where you just take a chance. I love the idea of ripping down a poster, by the way. I'd recommend that to my nephews regularly. And if you see something you like, make sure nobody else can get it. So that's fantastic. In the experience that you've got within sport then, and growing all the way through, we don't have to go through every single one of your connections, but people need to look up your LinkedIn page. You'll see who's Enda's worked for and what connections he's done. But has there been one sporting campaign that didn't cost a lot of money, but in your history that you saw, whether you were connected to it or whether you saw it from somewhere else, that you went, oh, that was really smart? Is there anything that stands out?
Yeah, and I'm not one to praise myself, Ant. As you know, I tend to deflect because there are better people than I in every piece of work I've ever done. But it was a campaign that we did in 2002, Be the Difference. And we did it on a relative shoestring. So our total budget for activation was 1/10 of the cost of the sponsorship itself. So you're still talking a couple $100,000, but it was nothing compared to what most agencies or most brands are spending. And we created a thing that won sponsorship Ireland Irish Marketing Awards. It won a Cannes Lion for marketing. And it led on to 3 years of a campaign, and it all grew from a single insight. And that insight was, I was struggling to come up with this, the concept to brief our agencies. And my boss, the best marketeer I've ever worked with, a guy called Johnny Cahill, who's now the CMO for Heineken USA. And Johnny said, we want to design the insight with this. Bang, bang, bang. 5 minutes later, we both looked and he went, That's it. I went, actually, yeah, you're right. We had the campaign out the door in 2 months. And we had 70,000 activations by the time of the Six Nations in 2019. We had 10,000 people's names printed into the numbers on the backs of jerseys from those 70,000. We brought in so many people from other networks that we then converted into O2 customers that it paid for the entire sponsorship for the year.
Wow. Wow.
And we went on to do brilliant campaigns that led on from that about being the difference. And it was just a magical time working with brilliant people and all of us come together with our unique skills going, I know how to do this bit and you do this bit, and working with great agencies. But I'll never, no matter what I do, that will always be a moment where I go, yeah, I'm proud of that. And I am proud of it. And I'm proud to say Eamon McCarthy and Johnny and myself and one or two others we created magic dust that time.
And you've hit the interesting words that I've always used, and you've heard me say this, is magic dust and the importance that you can bring into something. And some of the brands that I speak to, but also more importantly, some of the clubs that I speak to and the federations that I'm speaking to are always asking me the same question: what's my unique fairy dust? How do I get that fairy dust? And let's use some of the campaigns you've looked at. And let's say you haven't got much of a budget. What's your mindset when you sit down first to start thinking about a campaign? What is your first thought around creating that campaign or creating that appearance to grow the sport? What's your mindset when you sit down with that?
So a couple of things. Number one, and this is right through my career. Number one is, what is the customer looking for? So we're going through this in Badminton Ireland at the moment ahead of the Irish Open in November in the AIG Irish Open. And we're asking ourselves, what is it that why will people come? Now, our best player, Nat Noyen, may not be there because Nat could be on an Olympic qualifying tournament that gets more points, and he needs points to get to the Olympics. So so it's what's our unique point here? So we're asking, what do people want us to talk to them about? Why do they want to come to the event? So I'll always ask the people, why would you want to come to the event? Well, you haven't come before. What would make you come this time around? So you understand the customer insight. The second thing then is you want to communicate with them in an engaging way. So then you ask yourself, without spending any money, what are the assets I have? Now, as a sponsor, what have I got in my contract? As an NGB, who are my people? Who are my stars? What are my social channels? Where is my data that I can communicate out to people? So my first thing is, I have no money. Where can I go with the assets that I have? I'll give you an example. Again, going back to O2. All right. I got a call the day before the match. We're about to lose a major corporate customer. We're trying to get him to the game, but he wants his kids to go, but we've an over 18s policy in the box. And this is a major account we could lose worth, chunky 6-figure sum. I said, tell you what, I said, bring him down to training tomorrow morning in the Aviva. It's the captain's run. We have access to the captain's run. I will bring him in through the tunnel. We'll sit on the side of the pitch and we'll go from there. Saturday, the dad brings the son. Sunday, dad brings mum. Sorry, it was mum actually. Mum brings the son. Sunday, mum brought her husband. Mum had the weekend of rugby, but all the family were served. Cost us nothing. And then 20 minutes in, the Make-A-Wish Foundation had left, the media had left, everybody done. It was just him and me. And we were looking at Paul O'Connell's kit bag. And we were chatting to Rala, and Johnny Sexton stayed on for a session afterwards, and we were watching the way he was preparing for his kick. The following day, Mum came with Dad to the game. On the Monday morning, Mum had a frame signed jersey with a hammer, a roll plug, and a nail, going, this is for the kids' room. Total cost, one frame, €180, one hammer, €25, a roll plug, which I pulled out from my own wall at home, and a nail. Total cost about €220 outside of the hospitality, which she had anyway, and we saved that customer, and I think they're still with Vodafone.
And
cost about €30.
And that's where I find it fascinating when you're speaking to federations or clubs or whatever, and they are thinking that when it comes to budgets, they have to have X amount of figure, and they don't. Because the example you just gave there is sensational. Working at Munster, we used to have a situation where we created different concepts within that, very similar to what you've just spoken about.
Remember the most valuable thing you ever did, Anthony, was the war room.
Yeah.
The war room cost 10 plated meals And the value and the goodwill it generated was staggering, in the hundreds of thousands.
And the thing about the war room, just to give an example to people listening, the war room was basically the night before the biggest game we had. We brought people into a room, we took off their phone, we brought them down into the dressing room, and they basically got the team talk from the head coach, the forward coach, and the back coach as to what was happening the next day. Brought the hospitality the next day, and in that walk through the night before, they were told that they're going to kick the ball left for the kickoff because they wanted to target X player. When that happened, it suddenly created an unbelievable exposure. What is amazing, I think, within sport is that's a unique thing to that sport. And what people sometimes forget is you've got to have a unique connection to your sport. So even the conversation or the example you gave, which is about Johnny Sexton being sticking around and Paul O'Connell sticking around, you have to find your uniqueness within that, whatever the sport may be. So if it's badminton, if it's basketball, if it's soccer, if it's handball, whatever that may be. So that's an interesting.
I'll give you another example, Ant, to back this up. So you'll always have an athlete. Every sport will have their superstar. And if their superstar is any smart about themselves, and generally they're early 20s, they're digitally savvy, they're on social, and they have their own channel. And if you're going to that person, can you help sell this event? Oh, what do I need to do? Can you send 3 tweets about it? You could shift a couple of hundred tickets in the back of it. Give you an example once. Again, O2, we had the O2 venue, and we had as part of a contract, but we couldn't afford to advertise it. And we wanted to show Ireland, Australia in there. So we put all our money, about 20 grand in, to get the big screen in. That was it. With 7,000 seats to fill. Brian O'Driscoll sent out a tweet. Paul O'Connell sent out a tweet because they were our ambassadors, and the venue was filled. Back 2 tweets because we used the cheapest, most cost-effective way. Brian and Paul, their early stages of Twitter and all that, we set up the accounts with them. We helped them because we said we will want your audience to help push our product. But if you're, basketball or you're soccer or you're football or you're GA or you're hockey or whatever, you have your stars, and they're more inclined to go, we want to help you fill this place because it's good for us as well. Gets more people in, gets more money into the sport, etc. So if you have a good, healthy relationship with your talent, then you work with them to push your product as well. They're keen to help you if you have the good relationship with them. And then the cost again is extra zero.
And I think that again goes back to my point around everybody. It doesn't have to be these hundreds of thousands and advertising agencies, etc. There's ways of working in across the board, and there's ways of whatever the size of your brand is there. Moving on.
The average rule of thumb, Anthony, is as a sponsor is that you put a euro in for every euro that you're spending on the sponsored rights. Most I ever got up to was 35 cents in the euro. You get your assets. So for every, let's say if you spend €1 million or 10,000 euro or 100 euro on a sponsorship, the rule of thumb is you need to spend another 100. For every 100 you put in, you need to spend another 100, advertising, marketing, etc. I was generally spending somewhere between 25 and 35 cents on the euro. So for every €100 I was putting in the sponsorship, I was putting in about 25 to 30 on activation. And it was about making sure you have the best contract. You keep it open. You don't put it away. There's always phrase, we sign a contract and put it away and we have a relationship. No, your contract is there because you have all the assets inside it and go, what ones can I use to help grow? What ones can I use to grow my message, to make my message more appealing, to identify this unique story we can tell, to go back to our original point. Use your assets, use your contract.
My favorite part about that is whenever you get an asset book, whenever you sign off your contract, imagine that's cash. I say that to everybody. Imagine
100%.
And if you would you hand that cash over to random people because you've run out of time to use the cash? I don't think you would. Last question before I get to my favorite topic, the future of sport. We've just seen the end of the FIFA Women's World Cup and the absolute success story that was in Ireland, but also where I live in Sweden, but across the world, if I'm completely honest. The amount of goodwill it's created and the skill set that's been done and waking up a couple of people. There is still problems, though. I've seen on one of the most famous UK websites where they commented, said England women 0, Spain women 1, which I find disappointing, if I'm being completely honest. Where do you see the future of sport? Is it in women or do you see it somewhere else?
I agree, by the way, FIFA Women's World Cup, I actually enjoyed it more than I enjoyed the Men's World Cup. Apart from Argentina's drama in the semi and the final, and there was this messy romanticism at that point. Honestly, the quality, you're not going to compare like for like. If you want sport to be engaging and about interesting people that gets you to root for them and root for your country or root for your passion or whatever, FIFA Women's World Cup had bucket loads more of it. It had better drama, it had better moments and better skill, and the it had more human stories coming out about it. Not this sanitized, don't I look great? It was about people and partners falling out and the coach. It was full of better stories and better drama, and countries that we haven't seen play well for a while, like Colombia, who've put a modicum of money in, and suddenly, boom, look how well they're performing. Where do I see the future of sport? I'm going to break this down into three categories very quickly, Anthony, if you don't mind, all right? Youth participation is through the roof, and sports and government organizations and finance departments in national bodies or in national governments need to figure out. There's been a precipitous fall off in the rate of engagement with people 15 and over. It was always the case that, you grew up and you discovered boys, girls, drink, going out, the whole lot, but you kind of still played sport. It's actually getting worse and worse by the year. So there has to be a more active program. Now, we have it in Badminton Ireland, we call it Badminton, which is about getting badminton teenagers to play the sport, enjoy it, but also figure out there's other things they can do if they're not great, like volunteering or umpiring or ref or lines judge or whatever. So there's different ways you can stay around the game and not have to, put in the hours on the court training with all that. So, and we're actually seeing great results from it. So we've that, but there is that piece. That's number one. There's going to have to be a focus on that, because it's harder to get somebody back on track in their late 20s or early 30s or late 30s after they've had kids or marriage or they've got a mortgage or they have a life in a different community or whatever. It's harder to get back into it. Second piece is older generation. So talking to sports at the moment, and particularly in badminton, fastest growing demographic in our playing demographic in our sport is masters. It's people who are more active and healthier retiring and healthier in their 40s, 50s and 60s who want to then continue to play the sport they love. And they want to play it competitively. And that active, like, you can draw a clear graph. More people playing at that age level, reduction in hospital hours. So there has to be focus on that. The third area, and by the way, commercialize all of those programs if you're a sponsor whose target market is teens, if your target market is the Grey Pound or the Grey Sterling or whatever we used to call it back in the day. The third area is esports. Now, you're going to say, or a lot of people say, esports isn't sport. Well, 100 years ago, people didn't think darts was a sport, or people didn't think rock climbing was a sport. It is. It's evolution of sport. Esports is sports. Sport has this definition of active participation, but in time, with the development of headsets and a full metaverse, what you're actually going to see is gaming become much more active. So you're going to be getting up off your ass and you're going to be playing in a much more active way. This is where 15 to 25-year-olds are going. And there is an opportunity for sports to be involved in that area, not because, there's no rugby sim game, it's crap. There's no real, like, apart from soccer and NFL and NBA, there is no good sports sim out there. And even the most popular is only 16th, FIFA manager is only 16th on the list of most played or most watched esports. So there's other sports out there and other gaming titles that are out there that a sports brand or a sport can get attached to and involved in, build a new value stream on the side, and they will have to invest through investors and the whole lot. But on the back end of that, what you're going to get is an audience that's engaged with your sporting brand 10, 15 years down the line, when their kids are going to play sport for the first time, or when they've reached a point in life where they want to get back to their community and they feel closer to your brand because they haven't completely separated from it over a 15-year journey, like a lot of our friends and our peers have done, as they went on the life train once they hit 17 or 18. Esports is there to be commercialized, and they're the ones, to go back to my final point, they are great influencers. They live in a world of influencing and being influenced, and that ecosystem that exists is going to be where sport ends up. So that we cotton on to it. It's about the stories. It's about the players and their backgrounds and how they prepare and what their titles are like and what clothing they wore and where they went out last night and how tasty the pizza was. They've been doing this for a couple of years now on esports. And other sports are just cottoning on and trying to go, oh, let's commercialize it. Esports is way ahead. And as a result, we're only going to be following a lot of the model that esports set out in terms of how we tell a story and the openness of our players and our information. And we're following on. That's why I think esports is at the vanguard of where sports is going to end up in all shapes, actively on the pitch, off the pitch, on a wall, on a hockey, wherever. That on a court, that's where it's going to end up. It's going to be like esports in many ways. There's a lot of lessons sport can learn from esports, as there is esports can learn from sport around the health of an athlete, can help them perform better. And esports is only getting to that point now.
I love your analogy around esports. I completely agree. By the way, I love your analogy about sports where people didn't see rock climbing as a sport and now they do. You could keep going with that. That's a fantastic point, and it's something I think a lot of brands, when they think about sport, don't really associate with it. I would say the same with clubs. I think you're 100% correct. I'm moving on to the final topic, and it's just a bit of fun from my side, just to get to know you, but also throw in a couple of questions to see what reaction you get, because I'm always fascinated by people's opinions on sport and what it meant to them and where it sits in their ecosystem of life. Because for me, everything that AMSC stands for is about the passion of sport and growing sport and understanding that you can change the mindset of a commercialization product rather than just have just here's a deal, here's my contract I'm walking on. You can make it fun, you can make it engaging, and at the end of the day, sport is passion. Whether it's esports, whether it's badminton, whether it's rugby, whether it's soccer, no matter what it is, it's all about stories and all about passion. So this is quick 10 for quick shots at you. So
I'm ready.
Answer as quick as you can. Tea or coffee?
Neither.
Water. Water. In GAA terms, club or county?
Iced club.
In rugby terms, province or country?
Province.
Favorite holiday destination?
Italy.
Best ever sporting memory?
2 weeks at the Olympics in Beijing, 2008.
Katie Taylor or Kelly Harrington?
Kelly Harrington.
David Clifford or Gooch Cooper?
I have to plead the fifth.
An All-Ireland final ticket where Kerry are playing in it, or a Rugby World Cup final where Ireland are playing in it?
Kerry.
3 non-family or friend people that you would invite to in dinner if they can be dead or alive. Who would you bring?
Lee Connolly, Robin Williams, and Jesus. Billy and Connolly to give me the laughs, and Jesus to see if he was real.
I love that one. Last one. If someone decreed in the morning that sport was banned and no one was to ever be involved in sport, they couldn't talk about it, they couldn't be involved in it, outside of your job, what impact would it have on your life?
Cataclysmic, Anthony. I wouldn't know what I'd do. I'd probably convince everybody that esports wasn't a sport and try and go around the back door and have it dressed up as something else and keep going that way.
Enda Lynch, it's been absolutely fantastic having you on. I massively appreciate your time, and best of luck with the role in Badminton Ireland. Before I go, you spoke a couple of minutes ago about the AIG Irish Open. Is there anything that you'd like any of my audience to know about Badminton Ireland?
badmintonireland.com.
Where they should go about finding out about
tickets are on sale right now at badmintonireland.com for the AIG Irish Open, 17th, 18th, 19th of November. Some amazing talent. Also being broadcast this year with our partners in TG Car. And at any time, if you ever want to play the safest indoor and healthiest indoor sport you can ever come across, badmintonireland.com, and we'll show you how to play and what club to get connected with.
Again, Enda, thank you so much for your time. I massively appreciate it. Look after yourself. that was Enda Lynch talking about his unbelievable career within sport, going all the way back to when he was 5 or 6, watching it in front of Micheál O'Hare. I'm sure people in Ireland will remember that and remember his iconic voice. The other thing to take in mind when Enda was speaking about again was talking about the passion that people have at sport, but also the focus at which he looked at around esports especially, but also around what you should think about when it comes to conceptualization. So you don't have to spend all that money. You can actually focus on what your advice is, or what your product is, and turn that into gold. But it's got to be unique gold. It's got to be unique around your sport, or in the case of a brand, it's your brand. I've quite a lot more guests coming up, some fantastic ones. One who actually agreed to it today, which is brilliant. So you can find all these podcast series on my website, AMSC.se. If you want to talk to me about how I can help your club or your brand or your federation grow, you can contact me by either going straight onto the website, or you can contact me at Anthony.Morrissey@amsc.se, and I'd be more than happy to sit down and talk to you about everything that you possibly can have. As I always finish this podcast with the same sentence, I'm going to do this again. People should continue to look for the sun. What do I mean by that? Well, I'm looking out the window here and I'm in Cork and it's a little bit grey and dreary, but what I can tell you is the sun is still up there. You just got to go and try and find a way to find it. It's still there. Wake up every morning and keep searching for that sun. Keep enjoying yourself, keep doing sport, keep being active, whether that's in front of a computer screen or whether that's actually being out. Massively appreciate your time and looking forward to seeing you again. Thanks now. Bye-bye.